Welcome to Pop-Up Camper Pro. I'm your host Derek Smith, and today we're going to learn all about LP for your pop-up camper. The goal of today's video is to give you a basic understanding of how the LP system works on your pop-up camper. We're going to cover the tanks, the flow rates of LP, the regulators, the LP lines, common setups on pop-up campers, LP upgrades, and the monitors. For RVs, there's two common sizes of LP tanks, 20-pound tanks and 30-pound tanks. As you can see, most pop-up campers aren't set to accommodate 30-pound tanks. The tanks are too tall for the bed extensions to come out. High wall units would be the exception. Your LP tank has a date code on it. It's good for 12 years. Inspect your tank, make sure it's not out of date. Your tank should also have an OPD valve. It indicates overflow protection device. Knowing how much LP is in your tank can be done easily by just weighing the tank. Your tank has a tera weight on it. That's the weight of the tank when it's completely empty. A 20-pound LP tank will take 20 pounds of LP gas. By weighing the tank and deducting the tera weight, will tell you how much LP gas is in that tank. LP tanks have two types of connection, external Acme nut and internal POL. The internal POL is a reverse thread. Right is loose, left is tight. Inside your tank, the LP boils into a vapor. A full tank performs better than a half empty or an almost empty tank, especially in cold weather. If it's really cold and your LP tank is almost empty, expect your furnace to not blow as much hot air because there's just not enough volume of LP coming from the tank. When you're opening up your LP tanks, you want to do it slowly. That OPD valve will click close if the tank is open too fast. Keep your tank clean and painted. Excessive rust or dents will not allow a certified LP technician to refill that tank. So there's two types of LP pressure when it comes to campers. There's low pressure and high pressure. Low pressure regulators are designed for inside equipment. High pressure regulators are designed mostly for outdoor equipment. These are what you also find on your stoves and grills from big lot stores. So on campers, we'll pipe a high pressure regulator right past the bottle before we get to the low pressure regulator. From this extra line, we can run to exterior equipment such as an outdoor grill or an outdoor stove. For high pressure regulators, they come in 10, 16, 20, and 30 PSI. For Coleman and Fleetwood pop-up campers, the 16 PSI high pressure regulator was factory. For low pressure regulators, the difference is the amount of BTUs that they can put out. They're also blue and green as the most common colors in a lot of manufacturers for pop-up campers. Lower BTUs, such as this one, about 150,000 BTUs, are good for one or two indoor appliances. If you have 3 or more indoor LP appliances, choose a regulator with a higher BTU. Let's take a look at some examples. Here we have a very basic setup. We have Acme nut to the tank and a low pressure regulator feeding just the interior equipment on this camper. Notice the orientation of the low pressure regulator. There's vents on these regulators and they need to be facing downwards. On this Utah, we have an Acme nut hooks to the LP tank. We have a high pressure regulator that's feeding the outdoor stove, and then a low pressure regulator. Same setup on the Santa Fe, Acme nut, high pressure regulator for outdoor equipment, low pressure for inside. We have an internal POL fitting to an older style, larger high pressure regulator and to a low pressure regulator. This low pressure regulator is one of the single stages. On this Sun Valley, we actually have a LP setup problem. This is a barbecue grill regulator. We can tell by the black color of the Acme nut. So that tells me that this low pressure regulator was starved. It was never even getting enough BTUs with this incorrect regulator in front of it. This Santa Fe has a low pressure regulator with a POL nut that's screwed right into the internal setup on this tank. We can also see by this tank, by the style of the valve up here, it's not OPD, and the rust, that it is no longer good. So let's talk about appliances. There's high pressure appliances and low pressure appliances, mostly outdoor grills and outdoor ranges. High pressure appliances typically have the 20 thread connectors. They mimic the green bottles. High pressure appliances many times also have a small round high pressure regulator already on the unit. Low pressure appliances don't have a regulator on them. A quick connect fitting is the most common application for a low pressure hookup. So if you have a high pressure hookup on the side of your camper that mimics that 1 pound bottle threads, you cannot hook up a low pressure appliance to it, nor can you hook up a quick connect to it. You have to use a high pressure designed appliance with that hookup. The same is true vice versa. If your camper has a low pressure hookup on it, a quick connect on the side of the camper, you cannot hook up a high pressure cooktop to that system. Again, your high pressure appliance already has a regulator on it, and you can't double regulate the LP from low pressure back to high pressure. Now say your camper is set up for low pressure with a low pressure quick connect only, and you have a high pressure appliance that you would like to use with your camper. This high pressure tee is a great solution in this scenario. So Acme nut goes onto the tank, your Acme nut pigtail goes back onto here, and unscrewing this cap reveals the 20 thread high pressure connection to run a high pressure appliance. Let's talk about hoses, and we'll start with pigtails. So if you ever wondered why they were called this, it's because early versions were coiled copper and resembled a pig's tail. The name just stuck. So here we have our green external Acme nut, and there's a check valve inside this nut. Again, just the same way you can close the valve on your tank if you open it too fast. If you open it too fast as well, this valve in here can close. If you know your tank's full and you just open up your valve, you don't have any gas in your camper, close the tank, unscrew this valve, take it off, listen for an audible click, that's the valve resetting, put it back on, and slowly open the tank. These are available in different lengths, 12 to 24. When it comes to the LP hoses from your regulator to your camper, there's a few different connections that you might find. So when you're replacing a hose, taking it off, checking the ends and the sizes are helpful to make sure that you pick the correct hose for your camper. When you're replacing and servicing LP lines, you want to make sure that you use LP rated Teflon tape at the connections, and after you have it together, check your connections with leak detector. You just dab some of this on the connections. If it bubbles, you have a leak. You can double the amount of LP you take with you by adding a second tank and an automatic changeover regulator. These regulators work best by pointing the handle towards the full tank. When that one empties, point the handle to the opposite full tank. Your camper should also have an LP alarm. These are installed close to the floor. LP is heavier than air and it sinks. These will go off and scare you if there's an LP leak. If it's experiencing low voltage, not enough power coming from the battery, it will start chirping as well, indicating that, hey, I'm not working, I need more juice. These have a 7-year life expectancy and need to be replaced every 7 years to work properly. The manufacturer reports that hairspray can damage the sensor, so don't use hairspray around your LP detector. Unless you're stuck in the 80s, you should be fine. And that about covers it, folks. I hope this was helpful and you learned something. Please subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. Mash that notification bell, be alerted when new content is available, and I'll see you at the campground. PopUpCamperPro.com. Here you can find our official chalk art merchandise. Take a look. Send me your camping pictures too. If you got a great camping picture, yours might end up on the chalkboard next.